Good evening. We're here on February 12th at the Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. All members are present. TJ Gender is Gil is participating remotely, as is our supervisor liaison. First item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from January 8th. Any comments about the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
There we go. Now, are there any comments? Thank you. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions about the minutes? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
And that motion passes. What we had on our agenda as the third item was the planning modules, and I'm going to turn this over to Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 1273 Lindenhurst Road subdivision sewage facilities planning modules actually were already reviewed by the Planning Commission back in January of 2023. I inadvertently mixed up that one with 1511 Lindenhurst Road subdivision, which will be coming to you guys soon. So no action needs to be taken tonight on this matter, and it can be tabled.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is a model sustainable and renewable energy ordinance, which I believe was presented to the town by the county.
Yes, that's correct. David Kratzer kind of brought up this ordinance when me and Jim were working on a permit for a solar panel, and just noticed that the township is a little behind compared to some other municipalities in the state in terms of things that are by right and permitted uses in our ordinances for things related to alternative energy. So just a little summary of the ordinance in front of you. Updates have been made to the Bucks County Planning Commission's Model Sustainable and Renewable Energy Ordinance. The purpose is to provide for the use of alternative energy systems and facilities to establish fossil fuel reduction related to residential and non-residential development. This can be adapted to fit LMT's unique municipal requirements, most likely probably in the zoning and SALDO ordinances or other ones that are relevant. But this is just to begin the discussion and does not need to be recommended in full or even any action taken today. The ordinance is broken down by purpose, objective, definitions, applicability, land use, provisions for design, some bonus provisions related to development for residential and non-residential, permit requirements, and so on. I read the bonus provisions, and I think the ones for non-residential are kind of worth considering because I think it's a good trend in planning to make sure newer buildings are not necessarily LEED, but they're energy efficient and are promoting sustainability, which goes with our PA Sustainable certification. So it's, just on this trend of sustainability, we're trying to do our part, for climate change and just to make it a cleaner and safer place to live.
Thank you. Just before we have a discussion, a couple preliminary things. I'm wondering, I understand this has not been before the EAC yet, correct?
No, I sent this ordinance to them today for their review. It hasn't been on their agenda yet.
Okay, so obviously we'll hear their input at some point into this.
Yep.
Also, I'm just other communities in Bucks County have others adopted this or portions of it that you know of?
Not that I know of, but I do know that this was the second update to this model ordinance, so I'm assuming other townships have adapted it. Okay. Or parts of it. So.
I think
I'm sorry.
I believe a few municipalities have adopted the prior version of the alternative energy ordinance. And now we have an updated draft, but we can get you a list of those and what provisions they actually picked out of it to help you guys out.
So it would just be, I think it's good just for general knowledge to know.
Question, just make, I think I know the answer to this question, we'll make sure. This is only applicable to new developments, right?
Yes,
Okay. Because I mean, it just seems like,
or not like smaller scale too, stuff like new homes, or if someone wanted to put a alternative energy system on their house, or
it doesn't have anything, but it's not
Not-
applicable to upgrading existing properties.
I don't believe so. No.
Okay, because that to me for this kind of ordinance, which I'm fully supportive of, it would be more, you get more bang for your buck if you could apply it to existing renovations and existing developments that people want to upgrade. Like an office complex or somebody's home, because there's not many places left that you're going to be able to enforce, putting in solar panels or whatever. So that's just a thought that went through my head today.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the main point, one of the main things it's doing is to explicitly call out like uses by special exception or permitted uses. So it would just show that those existing uses could update them if they wanted to. But yeah, that's a good point.
So then, taking Adrian's thought process, the township has adopted the Uniform Construction Code and the Building Code. Is there any conflict in having portions of this, since it doesn't fall in the UCC? Because I don't know if new construction totally or for renovations would qualify. So I would ask Dan to double check to make sure there wasn't any conflict in that nature.
Yeah, I have a contact with the planning commission I can reach out to, and then I can speak to Mike Kirk and some of the inspectors just to get their feedback.
So one of the comments just looking at the sections on, I guess, was definitions of wind energy systems, and then the regulations concerning land use and dimensional regulations for wind energy systems. It looks like it's mostly contemplating sort of large scale wind power. And nowadays although people are trying to dive into that, it's old technology. There's a lot newer stuff. I mean, if you go online, you can see that sort of like a Generac, you can get a bladeless thing and stick it on your roof so that if we lose power, and it can, create power and store it in a battery and then, run your house on it. So this doesn't really address those kinds of things. There's also a lot of shorter, I guess, commercial grade wind generating technology that's coming online. I think Bill Gates is really into a lot of that. And I could see a situation where you have a warehouse, a supermarket, something like that, where they want to stick stuff up on top of it that's not really that tall. That assumes we have enough wind blowing around here, which I'm not sure that we do. But in case we do, I think you probably want more flexibility in some of these definitions to contemplate newer technology.
Yeah, that's definitely something that can be considered. Thank you. I think some of the energy systems are some are more realistic than others. I can't imagine the township's going to be too keen on geothermal energy, or even wind. I feel like that might be on a larger scale wind. But to your point, smaller scale stuff could be applicable as technology advances and stuff. But like
Yeah, Jay, I
solar,
gotta agree with you and Tony as far as having, windmills in people's yards and stuff. So I don't think that's going to be probably something that'll be plausible to the township. But, obviously the more greener we can get as far as, solar panels and different other things to kind of help the environment, obviously that's going forward, it seems like a big plus, I think, for the township and for everyone.
And just for everyone's benefit, we actually do have several geothermal systems in the township on individual lots where people have invested the money to do it. It does take up a lot of room, so you do need a larger yard for the most part. We also do have a few places with green roofs and a few other things, so I think that's something that this is kind of a nice start to look at, some of the things they have in there. We have to look at a little more critically about how do we really want to incentivize this or permit it or not permit it, and in what areas.
And I think from the incentivized standpoint, to my earlier question, I don't know how you would even do it or if it's even feasible, but it's worth a discussion, maybe, John, to go back and, is there a way for the township to incent people to, when they're redoing their roofs, which a lot of people have redone their roofs in the last couple of years because the storms have come through, to put solar on their roof?
Yeah, I think they kind of call that out in the bonus provision section. Some of the ways was like a decrease in the permit costs. And for like larger scale stuff like subdivisions in the escrow, and additional dwelling units. So
On the, so on the bonus side, again, that really only applies to new construction, right? And I had a concern there around, so if the township is going to adopt something like this, we went through a lot about increasing density when we were talking about open space provisions. And I think the end result of that was there's really not much interest in allowing an increase in lot density.
Mhm.
So just an initial, that was my kind of first note here. If we move forward on this, the wind stuff doesn't appear to be applicable. But out of section 5 or section 6, we'd probably be striking the increased dwelling density without different direction from the board. I know we have a new board now, but that would be an issue I'd like the board to weigh in on before we spent a lot of time on that as a project.
That's a great point.
The other point that I wanted to raise was with number 5, this all seems great, right? So to the chair's point, there's some landscaping stuff here, some of the things that the EAC would want to weigh in on, but it seems great. There's not that much undeveloped land left in the township though, so I'm not sure how much we're gonna put a bunch of effort into advertising changes and putting these things on the books for 2 remaining developments. So.
yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And the good thing with the model ordinance is we can adapt or recommend to adapt as little or as much as you'd like. So I think we're in a good position in that sense.
Any other comments? Jim, this may sound a little silly, but you had mentioned green roofs and sort of that there are a number of them already in the community. I guess it's more of a construction issue with the weight of them and how that is dealt with. That's all in here?
Well, that would be more in the building code. This part would just regulate some of the features of a green roof and how you do it.
That sort of gets back to Barbara's point about how it interacts with the building code. And yeah, we just need to make sure that everything works together.
Yeah, and that's why Dan wanted to just sort of present it as a first blush. Everyone take a quick look. What are your thoughts on this? What extra homework would you like us to do to provide you with information that would be useful in looking at this further? As you pointed out, did it go to the EAC? Yes, we sent it to the EAC. I think it would have come in too late for their last meeting, which was a week ago. So we held off until after their meeting so they wouldn't get distracted by it. And hopefully we'll get their input at their next meeting.
Yeah, do we have information as far as how many houses in the township do have solar panels or any other type of renewable energy?
We have a rough approximation from building permits. I forget what the number are, but there is a sizable amount of folks out there who have solar panels on their roof, just based on the permits that I've seen.
Okay.
So I guess what you're looking for from us is just sort of a list of things that maybe to follow up with. And obviously one was, EAC input. Another would be, as Colin said, about supervisor input as to the density issue. Third thing would be applicability to existing construction in addition to new construction. I guess, what else was there? There was just sort of flexibility on the wind power. And just making sure that things like the green roof requirements are don't conflict with the building code and things of that sort.
And one other thing was, who else has adopted this sort of similar ordinance, and what provisions did they come up with?
And one more thing I'd add, or just to repeat, I think what we talked about before, I'd go through just the different areas and just identify like things like wind. I don't know how much energy I'd spend on that. I mean, like there's more opportunity, like solar, there's definitely opportunity, there's geothermal, there's opportunity,
Although, but I'm just telling you, they sell right now, you can get an individual unit on your house, just like a Generac. And so right now, there aren't many of them,
right.
but in 5 years, there might be,
Okay.
so.
And that's a fair point, but my point was just look at it based on, depending what the scope is. If you're just talking about new development, how much energy you're gonna put into things, even if there is new technology down the road. But I would just scope it out and talk about and then really decide what are the priorities and where can the township have an impact? Because this is an incentive ordinance, right? We're trying to more encourage people to do these sorts of things. Is that correct?
I would say a portion of it's an incentive ordinance. I think the other portion of it is to specifically call out types of alternative energies and provide definitions and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
That's not, but we're not like limiting and saying, we want you to do it this way.
In some parts we are. So if we were to adopt this in full, Section 5 sets like building standards, and it essentially says you shall lay out roads at this angle.
Oh,
You
okay.
shall
I didn't read it
have
that way.
windows on this face.
Okay, I didn't read it that way.
There's
Yeah.
they show setback requirements and all
I
that,
thought it's just encouraging.
site plan requirements, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, piece.
To-
I guess that's my point though, is just like, before you go into bunny holes on specific things, I'd look at this thing in mass and say, decide where really, in the realistic sense, is this going to be impactful in Lower Makefield, and focus on those, because you get lost in a bunny hole on a lot of these things that may not mean anything. That's all. That's just my input, because we're sort of mature stages development cycle.
Well, and to that point, I would recommend maybe focusing on commercial redevelopment over anything else,
Right.
right?
Perfect.
Like, we were talking about solar. There's a lot of parts of the country now where parking lots are essentially now being covered, and it's solar structures, right? So just reading through this, I'm not sure whether or not that is allowed, if it's easier, if it's in conflict. So I'd want to do a reading of this with that in mind, right? If a shopping center wanted to redevelop and include solar panels in the parking lot, right, covering some of that asphalt, would that be permitted here or encouraged? I think the thing that I did like the most out of all this was in 4B2. Yeah, 4B2, which is solar, and it relates to solar within the historical district. And it really just recommends that HARB would have to grant a certificate of appropriateness to allow solar in any of the historic district. And I think that that's probably a net good that we can just go ahead and recommend without having to worry about any of the rest of this stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah, seems to be logical.
But I'd also make sure we make note that there are, to Tony's point about like the wind, there are things out there that people don't necessarily know. Like I got solar put on my roof, and one of my biggest trepidations was I thought it was gonna have that sort of shiny blue with the grid. It's not like that. The latest Tesla roofs, I mean, you can't from the street, you can't even, it's the same color as my roof. You can't even tell it's there. So it's important to just make sure it's not coming from even to Harb, it's a direction for them. It's like, look at the alternatives. And we don't want to compromise the historical aspect of it, but there's also things out there that they should be open-minded to.
Flexibility.
Yeah.
Any other comments? John, did we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
John.
Mr. Chair, just a few things that, just in cursory thoughts. One, in terms of areas to consider, we have a number of multifamily properties or even condo associations, and there's an opportunity for us to add alternative energy sources there. And if there's ways that we can incent that or encourage it, that's good. One thing I didn't see in the draft ordinance was around sustainable construction materials and what our options are to mandate certain kinds of sustainable construction materials that reduce the total net amount of greenhouse gases. That's something, if there's a way that we can both have carrot and stick with this legally that suggests that, you know, we can mandate certain building techniques. In terms of anything that generates energy, the question is, where does it get stored and how does the connection to the grid occurs? And are there ways that we can encourage our, you know, energy generation partner or energy distribution partner, PECO, to make it easier for connections to the grid, or even have like a regional storage of energy within neighborhoods or sectors of the township down the road if this becomes more popular. And I know Dan and Dan and Jim, when you look at this, there's been a dramatic increase in incentives at the state level in the state of New Jersey for solar, and it'd be interesting to see what the outcome is for that in terms of what the you know, sustainability goals and stuff that has been met there as as information and case for this ordinance going forward. That's really what I had.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Any other comments? Okay, so there's no need for us to obviously make a motion on this. Just you have our thoughts, and I guess we'll see it again at some point. Oh, is there any public comment on this issue? Thank you. Okay, thanks, John. Or Jim, excuse me. And I guess next item on our agenda is, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Done.
Hi, everyone.